Welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum.
Welcome back to Let's Thrive Postpartum. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Ashley.
And we are glad you're here today. We're going to talk about a topic that I guess to me feels is very much in social media right now. It's very much a buzzword. And we're going to talk about mom rage, what it means. Ashley, is it a real thing?
It is a real thing. Sometimes if you have a therapist or you're talking to somebody else, we might call it maternal rage or maternal anger. But yeah, most people out there are calling it mom rage. Sometimes people say it a little tongue in cheek, but it is a real thing. And it happens to, I would probably maybe go out on a limb and say most moms out there have experienced it.
So I feel like I know what mom rage is. I'm pretty sure I've had it, right? We're a lot of times we feel in society as a mom, we're supposed to be very happy all the time and peaceful and giving our child a loving environment. And then out of nowhere, the amount that you want to scream at somebody and let it all out. And I'm not an angry person. Ashley, what does it feel like if you're having mom rage?
Yeah, a lot of people describe it, and I can say with experience myself as well, that it is really feeling a little out of control. So it might be screaming, it might be throwing things, it might be being a little more forceful than you might be at times. But overall, it's this feeling that you've suddenly kind of snapped and are out of control. And you feel this surge of anger, and it's beyond what, everybody gets angry and frustrated at times. Mom rage is really more this really big surge of anger that feels very scary. People describe it as feeling very scary afterwards, where you're like, I don't know where that came from. That is really out of the norm for my personality. Yeah.
That makes sense. And if you are already struggling after having a child, maybe you've got postpartum depression symptoms or anxiety. Ashley, how does mom rage play into postpartum anxiety and depression? Is it a symptom? Is it something different? How does all that kind of relate with each other?
Yeah, it can be a symptom. I mean, irritability is a common symptom of anxiety and depression. Mom rage can occur to anyone, regardless of whether you are experiencing or have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. But they all kind of go hand in hand because so much of it has to do with like these feelings of guilt, with feeling overwhelmed, with feeling like you don't have enough support. And all of those factors can contribute to everything that has to do with our mental health. And so mom rage is something, it doesn't mean that you have postpartum depression or anxiety. It could be a symptom of it. It could also be something that people are just experiencing on their own, and also far beyond like the postpartum period. I mean, maternal rage can happen really at any point in motherhood when there's kind of this like confluence of factors that are building up.
And that makes me feel better from a mom who's experienced bouts of this to know that it's, again, kind of a normal thing that we don't talk about a lot, but that it can happen anytime in childhood, right? Maybe she's going to be 10 one day and I'm still going to have this amount of emotions that's going to come out one way or the other. Yeah. So actually thinking about that, where does this come from? I mean, we love our child. We're trying to do the best we can for our child. Why do you just want to scream at them so bad when you know that's not logical and that's not acceptable, or it's something you don't want to do, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we will go back and say that it has a lot to do with a huge amount of unmet needs for the mom, and which makes sense, right? You think about the idea of a mom being like a bucket, and you're giving and pouring all day, every day. And no matter who you are really as a person, if you get to a point where your bucket is empty and it's not being refilled, there's so many emotions there: anger, sadness, frustration, disappointment, like all these different things. And a lot of times the easiest way for all of those emotions to come out is anger. Anger is, and I wanted to note this, anger is what we also call a secondary emotion. It normally happens as a result of a bunch of other emotions that are going on. And so that's why when someone is angry, if you go and dig deep enough and ask, really, there's something else there. They are sad. They are feeling guilty. They are deeply disappointed. They're very embarrassed. They're frustrated. Like there is always something going on. And so when we think about the unmet needs of mothers, the list could go on and on, right? And it's different for every mom, but it could look like a significant lack of support in motherhood, from family or from a partner. We always joke about, where's the village? Where's this village that everybody keeps talking about? Some people have more of one, some people have nothing. And so there's a lack of support. There could be relationship frustrations with your partner. You could have multiple kids and you're trying to navigate having a baby and kids. You could be going back to work and feeling guilty about that. You could be a stay-at-home mom and feel very misunderstood about what that role looks like. You could have poor sleep, poor eating, poor exercise. I mean, there's so many things, but a lot of it goes back to unmet needs and you're empty. You're running on empty.
So I'm a mom and my bucket is empty, right? Let's in this scenario, if you're a mom listening and you hear yourself and you're like, yes, check. I don't feel like I have a lot of support. My village isn't there. I'm working around the clock. I'm tired. To go from my bucket is empty to that moment of rage where I want to yell at my child, what causes that shift? And is there anything I can do to kind of reduce that from coming out as rage?
Yeah. So sometimes people are able to pinpoint specific triggers for their rage or anger, right? Sometimes it's triggers for low-level anger and annoyance that slowly over time builds up. So a lot of times I like to start out with trying to figure out what is it that triggers frustration and annoyance, right? Or do you know something that triggers these big moments of anger? Is there anything for you, Kelly? What do you think?
Well, have been thinking about this. I knew we wanted to talk about mom rage. I've had a couple of bouts in the last few years of mom rage, and they've been very different things. So one of the things that I know we haven't talked about, but I just want to throw out there is my first mom rage happened at around month 3 or 4. And I know we've talked about our journey and the fact that I went on medication for antidepressants, and I started just constantly having mom rage. I remember one time I screamed at my child who was 4 months old. I've never yelled at really somebody before loudly, much less an innocent 4-month-old who wanted diaper. And I think that was one of those moments where I was like, I don't feel like me. I would not do this. She didn't do anything. And I realized my antidepressant was giving me mom rage. I ended up going back to the doctor. We switched stuff. So if it's something that's just constantly there, you may want to look and see, is there any medication factors? But I had a side effect to my first antidepressant and it was rage. But then after that, I have had a couple. And for me, I've been trying to sit down and think of what was my trigger, like you mentioned. And I think mine comes always, you mentioned there's that unmet need, but mine is overstimulation. Usually when my dog is barking because she wants to go outside, my child is screaming because she just fell down or she needs something, the TV's on. I also usually am trying to get something accomplished. I'm trying to get us out the door to a dentist appointment. I'm trying to do something and it just comes out. I instantly get raged up and have to remind myself, okay, we're late. How do I work through this? But stimulation is a lot for me and all that's going on that I control.
Yeah. It's actually the auditory overstimulation is super, super common with moms. It's something we think about a lot with kids. When you think about kids that are easily overstimulated, and you'll hear about kids that have, they're overstimulated by clothes and by sounds and all these things, but it happens with moms all the time. I've actually recommended with some moms, when you're in the car, when you're at home, can you have one AirPod in and listen to some calming music? Or they actually make these little earplugs now that you can put in that diffuse certain levels of noise that kind of soften all the background noise that's going on, that some people find helpful. And I mean, it's for me too. I mean, I know when there's too many loud noises going on, I get real snappy real fast. And I'll walk around and, I'm like, everything's getting turned off. iPad off, toys turned off, turn off the dishwasher, anything that's beeping. And that is something that is so incredibly common for moms. Some people are also being overstimulated by a mess, right? Like you walk into the playroom and there's toys everywhere. You come home and you walk in and everything is a mess and it's very overwhelming, and a lot of this, one of the first, steps that a mom can take is acknowledging it, right? To acknowledge, I am overwhelmed, I am angry, and trying to piece together, I am really overwhelmed in this scenario. I get really overwhelmed in this situation, to try and pick something that, no one's ever going to know exactly why. We're never going to know every single irritant in our lives. It's not possible. I don't know that I would want to know that anyways.
A lot.
Yeah. But trying to find a couple of things where you're like, this, I know this is something that bothers me. Once you're aware of it and you acknowledge it, then you're able to do something about it, right? Like once I have a professor who, and I say this to everybody, that told me a long time ago, once you have awareness, then you have choice. If you're aware of it, you can decide to do or not to do something about it. And that sense of control feels pretty good.
It does. And I think even just going back to the word overstimulated, I didn't know what that really was. And again, I feel like it's kind of a buzzword on social media and mom groups.
Mm-hmm.
Really sitting down and thinking, what is this? And then realizing it is the noises. And I've come to learn that I'm very sensitive to overstimulation. I didn't really know that was a real thing 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Being aware and thinking, why am I annoyed right now? Like, what is it? And taking that moment and saying, I'm annoyed. These 8 things are bothering me.
Right.
And 8 of the 8 were stimulation.
Yeah. And 2, saying it without saying like, well, I know I'm being dramatic, but this makes me feel this way, right? We don't need that kind of qualifier on it. It's unnecessary. It's just mean. And that's a lot of times I think what society's voices are telling us as women, like, oh, you're being dramatic, or, oh, like you should just be able to power through. If something's making you feel uncomfortable in any way, guess what? That's okay.
Add the word you're being hormonal into that.
Yeah.
I feel like that is also one of those things. They're like, oh, you're a female, it's hormonal. And that brings out the mom rage instantly because it makes me want to, right?
Well, you feel invalidated, right? You feel invalidated. I tell women all the time, there's a lot going on out in the world that invalidates us already. Let's not do it to ourselves. And so acknowledging that something makes you feel a certain way is a way of validating yourself, right? Like I am uncomfortable and frustrated when there's lots of loud noises. Period. That's all you have to say.
And I add, oh, I'm sorry to that, to everything. I invalidate myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trained that way by society and how I grew up. But being able to do that and not say, and I'm sorry at the end, it is period.
Period.
So Ashley, we both had mom rage and
Mm-hmm.
we're think through what it is. What do you do in Europe? So my first one I mentioned, my child was 4 months old and there wasn't a lot of damage. I mean, I picked her up, hugged her, and I realized I had an issue, but she's getting older. Your kids are getting older. They know if mommy yells at them and mommy is their safe place, that instantly to me feels like mommy is not safe anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless if your child is 2 or 14, right? What happens when that eruption comes? What do you recommend that we do to kind of repair or fix, or can we?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to talk about with parents because it is very natural to and healthy in a way to feel, right, some guilt. Little amounts of guilt that tells us I don't normally act this way. I don't like that this happened. If we don't feel guilty about anything, that can kind of help us check our own behavior sometimes. So yes, you're going to feel guilty. If you have this like big eruption and this kind of rage episode, doesn't feel good for anybody. If you can say to yourself and you acknowledge to yourself, that did not go the way that I wanted it to go. This is not how I would like to handle situations like this as a mom. Okay. That puts you in a place of saying, well, now what am I going to do about it? And one of the things with kids, no matter how old they are, is you can always reconnect and repair. And what that might look like, you may not be ready to do it in the moment, right? Sometimes we need a little while to calm down for our nervous systems to re-regulate. Sometimes if we get upset, our kids then might have some big behaviors because then they're feeling all their feelings. So everybody might need a little bit of time, but whenever that seems appropriate, like with my son, I do a lot of this at bedtime. We're reading books. It's just he and I, and we're very, close and cuddling. And a lot of times I'll say, hey, you remember earlier today when mommy's voice got really loud? I'm like, that I feel like that probably felt a little scary for you. Yeah, I don't like it when your voice gets loud. It does feel kind of scary. And I say, I'm really sorry that was how I responded in that situation. What I want to do and what I'm going to try and do next time is take a deep breath, maybe walk away and take a break before I say something. And that way, mommy's voice will stay a little bit calmer. And he'll say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then that's it.
So can I say back to you what I heard from that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first thing was you said mommy's voice got loud. So you talked in a child language of this happened, not mommy was frustrated or mommy did this. It was you saw an actual physical sign, mommy got loud.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it was, I'm sorry, here's why, and here's what I'm going to do. Okay. I love that. Mommy's frustrated because that would have been mine. I'm so sorry. I yelled at you. I was frustrated. I'm sorry. But that doesn't really say, hey, I'm not going to do it again.
Right. You can kind of close the loop. And some kids, if they know what the word frustrated means, it's okay to say, I got frustrated and I yelled. Right. I try and say, like, think about what you would want your kid to do as they get older. What we like to see in other adults is people owning what they did, right? Saying, I did this. This could be how it made you feel. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and do this differently next time. So it's like, it's soothing for us. It feels good, but it's also a lesson for our kids. And like, it's okay to say when you've messed up. And it's okay to say, this is what I'm going to try and do differently next time. And sometimes as kids get even older, there's even days where my son will say, I could have taken a deep breath too. I got really angry and yelled. And I'm like, yeah, we both could have taken deep breaths. So there's even been days he's called me out in the middle of me raising my voice and he has said, Mommy, you forgot to take a deep breath.
But I love that you guys have had this conversation so much that
Yeah.
he knows deep breaths help mommy and me in this situation to calm down. We're not even there yet. I love the fact that that is something you two are connecting with and he is learning about his own emotions. Well done, Mom.
They're always listening. They're always listening. So no matter what, kids are hearing, for better or worse, they see everything, they hear everything. And when they're hearing good things, it comes back out at some point.
Yeah. So going through it. So as a mom, your needs aren't being met. You're probably triggered by something. If you erupt or have rage or react as a way you don't want to react, then it's looking at that reconnection and repair conversation with your child. But Ashley, let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
Is there any way in that loop, you're mad, you come out, you reconnect, you repair. Is there any way to stop it before you erupt? Is there anything you can say? I'm in this moment, I'm triggered, to the deep breaths work? Any suggestions for us to keep it from happening in the moment?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. It doesn't always work, right? We know anger happens sometimes so fast and so quickly. But the more that you're trying to be aware of yourself and how you're reacting to situations, sometimes you'll start noticing when it's like starting to build up. And so in those cases, sometimes can you go to the bathroom for 30 seconds? Like distance yourself from whatever is overwhelming you or whatever is like causing the anger. Can you go to the bathroom for 30 seconds and close the door and like take a couple deep breaths? If you can't, can you distract yourself with something in that moment to try and like interrupt this kind of anger spiral that we put ourselves in? If your spouse is nearby, sometimes spouses, you can kind of have a look that you give each other, or you can just say like, I'm tagging out. And I work with couples all the time. Like if you know this happens with your partner and you start to notice it, say, go take a break. I'm going to tag in, right? Have this agreement that you're going to take over, because a lot of times what is overwhelming to one parent for whatever reason in the same moment is not overwhelming to the other parent, and vice versa. And so you can kind of like trade off to give each other that space in the moment, but know that it's not always going to work long term. Trying to figure out like, what is it that you feel like you are missing, right? What is that unmet need? How can some of those get like checked off or filled up just a little bit on a weekly basis, some on a daily basis, some on a monthly basis, whatever that is, and trying to have an open dialogue about like what is hard, what's not going well, so that your cup's just not as empty. Because when it's not as empty, and everybody has weeks, they'll be like, gosh, don't remember if I felt angry at all this week. Everything seemed to go okay. It's probably because all these other things and parts of your life, maybe they were going better. Maybe they were, had the attention paid to them that they needed, and you were able to feel more confident, calm, peaceful, insert whatever word.
That what so many of us moms want who are listening, and myself included, is that peaceful, calm, relaxed parenthood that you kind of imagine getting to do. Ashley, let me ask you this. So if you're a mom listening and this is new and you haven't thought through, I had to sit down and kind of think through what's causing my anger. How do you become aware? You'd mentioned that becoming aware, you can't change something if you're not aware of something. Well, how does a mom start to become more aware of how she's feeling and in those moments and bigger needs being met? How do you start looking inward to be aware of that? Any ideas?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, I mean, mom rage is often pretty, not always, but it's pretty obvious, right? It's something that happens, and a lot of times, pretty right after it happens, you're like, oh, this is not how I am all the time. That didn't feel good. The first thing is just recognizing that there are times where maybe you're not feeling quite like yourself, right? Where you're feeling really angry, where you're feeling really tired, where you're feeling anxious and nervous. And so, honestly, I do sometimes what I do with little kids is I'll list out a bunch of different feelings, basic feelings: nervous, scared, angry, happy, bored, confused. And I'll say, go through and tell me what are times that you have felt these feelings, right? And you have to sit and think about it.
Mhm.
But when you're not aware of your feelings and you're kind of going through the day, you're not always thinking like, this makes me angry. This makes me scared. This makes me nervous. Once you start identifying some of those things, like in a conversation or just with yourself, again, your brain is now aware of it. It's really hard for our brains to let things go when we like bring it up to like our consciousness and like our kind of awareness. So once you say like, well, this makes me happy, this makes me angry, this makes me sad, these are times, your brain's kind of like, okay, all right, now we know these couple of things, and it makes it easier to identify it in like other parts of life. And then it is, I mean, it takes practice, and it's hard because once you're aware of your feelings, you're aware of your feelings.
You are. And you're right. They're going to be there until you kind of address them. Good and bad.
Yeah.
What about your day? And suddenly you have a great cup of coffee and you're by yourself and you're quiet on the front porch and you think to yourself, this makes me happy. That's a good thing for you to acknowledge that, right? Because
Yeah.
there are other things that pop up, or in the middle of it, you're driving to daycare, your child's screaming in the back and she's throwing things. You're like, this makes me anxious. So just kind of naming stuff throughout the day kind of
Yeah.
strengthens that muscle.
Just naming it, right? And that is a hard thing because we do want to qualify things all the time. Like, I don't know why they're acting this way, or I don't know why I have to. If you just say it because you're feeling it, nothing bad is going to happen by just acknowledging an emotion, because it's just a feeling. Feelings are feelings.
It is. And I feel my perception a lot from being a female in society is that it's not okay for women to be angry or
Hmm.
to rage. You're saying that it's okay that we all have these feelings and you don't have to qualify them.
Yeah. Well, and it's more than okay, because if you don't acknowledge it, you're suppressing it, because everybody is angry at times.
Mhm.
Right? Like, feelings exist whether we want them to or not. Everyone experiences the full range of them. If we don't acknowledge them, then we're suppressing them. And when we suppress them, it builds rage because we're not able to say what we feel. We feel like we can't say it, and that builds rage in and of itself. I tell people sometimes, think of your brain kind of like a refrigerator, and all the contents of the fridge are all of your thoughts and feelings. And the stuff that gets left in the back of the fridge that you're not cleaning out, that you're not kind of like cycling through, it's going to rot and it's going to stink and smell. And that is like some of our more unhelpful feelings, like rage, anger, resentment, right? Those things that everybody is like, this doesn't feel good. This is not good. We got to clean the fridge out. So sometimes I even ask myself, I'm like, what's going on in my brain? Have I cleaned it out today?
That's a great analogy because I feel like no matter how many times you go through and clean the fridge out, there's always something in the back that I didn't realize that was there from last time. And
Yeah.
so to have that visual, I need to clear this out. So it's only the fresh new stuff that's good and hasn't spoiled is in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's just thinking about it, right? Sometimes it's okay to sit back and say, today was hard. I felt really irritated this morning. You don't have to say it out loud. You could think it to yourself. You could write about it. You could paint a picture about it, whatever it is. But just acknowledging on some level, I felt happy this time today. I felt kind of angry at this point today. I was frustrated, right? Again, once you're aware, I was frustrated when this happened, you can decide, am I going to do something about it or not? Sometimes we don't need to do anything about it. But sometimes we could say, I do need to talk to my partner about this. Actually, I think some resolution here would feel good. And that's okay.
And or maybe it's one of those, I get overstimulated. These things are too much for me. Maybe I'm going to try to reduce the stimulation in these hours when I know I can be triggered easily. Even those
Yeah.
basic things, I'm going to take the batteries out of some of the noise making toys.
Take the batteries out.
She will like them just as much, right? We have things that have run out of batteries. I'm using air quotes because you can't see me, but that run out of batteries quite often because we just can't handle it.
Yeah. I intentionally, with my second, didn't buy toys that make noise. because I didn't like it. And, it's been okay.
Right now, we're in a phase where we hate toys that make noises. It's the most amazing phase. It's a new thing and it's great.
That's amazing.
Just fully, because it's helping me not feel over anxious from hearing just all the time. Bring it back to what you said. So you said a lot of mom rage comes from often a buildup of unmet needs. What can a mom do? Is there anything that we can prepare for, especially if you're already struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety, to help support your needs or kind of go through ways to prevent this?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things is making a plan, especially if you're pregnant or newly postpartum, is making a postpartum care plan for yourself. Remember, this is all about you, mom. Baby has a plan. Baby's okay. You need a plan for yourself. And the plan that you have, Kelly, through Thrive Postpartum is so all encompassing. It covers all of these needs, right? Like your social needs, your mental health needs, your physical needs, eating, like everything. When you think through it, again, thinking through something brings it up to awareness. So if you've thought about it, it's in there somewhere. So walking through and just thinking and having the conversation with your partner, with yourself or supportive family about what your postpartum plan looks like, you're going to already have some of the stuff in place where if you're like, oh, I notice I get really, really angry faster when I'm hungry. Okay. What are we going to do do we have enough food, easy to cook things in the fridge or in the freezer that I can like pop in the microwave? Or if it sounds, thinking through that, can I call someone to come and take over for a few minutes? Who am I going to call? When you have a plan, it's just so much less thought that you have to put in everything, which as moms, we know that like the less thinking that we have to do and like decision making in the moment, the better life is.
It is. And we, as Ashley mentioned, we've created a postpartum mental health plan specifically for moms. So again, you've planned everything for your baby, but this is for you and it's absolutely free. So we want this to be something that share with moms in your life. Download it for free. If you come to wethrivepostpartum.com/postpartum-plan, and we'll put the link as well directly in the show notes. It's free. Come download it. Ashley mentioned it's quite a few pages, but it's looking through all the things that you can pre-plan in your life to kind of meet some of those needs. And we built it so that every couple months you could go in and redo it because you're going to have very different needs when you're pregnant than when you have a 6-month-old or a 2-year-old. So come back in and kind of redapt it, but we want to help you to plan to make some of this easier for you. And again, it's free. Just come download it and use it.
And even if you don't consider yourself right now to be a postpartum mom, looking through a plan like this might help you identify some things that are triggers that you're not thinking about, right? Like we can't think about everything all the time. So looking through this, you might say, oh gosh, I've never even thought about that. I do think that's something that is a trigger for me. So it's helpful. It's helpful for anyone.
Agree. And with so many moms, whether you've been diagnosed with postpartum anxiety and depression or not, but if you are in one of those things where you just feel like you're struggling and this should be a little bit easier, this was designed for you, right? This was kind of to help you figure out ways to be easier and just kind of help you build that plan to support yourself because everybody's needs are different.
Exactly.
Ashley, I love knowing that when these feelings of rage and anger hit, and I want to scream, and I don't feel like I'm usually a mad, angry person, there's something that just helps in my soul to know that this is a situation, this is not me. I'm not about that this happens. And it's not honestly just a social media term. I mean, how does kind of thinking through mom rage help you in your real life?
Yeah. I mean, I think in my real life, I know that it happens, right? I feel guilty. I try to not like attach so much shame to it by avoiding it. Lots of things we like to avoid in life. When I have those moments, I will say to myself, I'm like, okay, Ashley, like you let your emotions get too big right now. Why? What was going on? Were you tired? Are you hungry? Are you feeling like exhausted? Do you need help? Do you need support? And I'm trying to have this conversation with myself of like, this is a sign for me that something's not getting filled up. What do I need to do? And it puts me in a place. It's kind of like being on the springboard of like, I'm like, okay, like I need to go make a snack. I need to go get a smoothie. I need to go to yoga tonight. I need to like have extra cuddles with my kids. I need some quality time with my husband. Like, what is it that I need? And being able to identify just one thing and then making it happen helps, and it feels good.
Then you've also
And
moved forward to hopefully reducing it next time.
yeah.
Ashley, will you go for us one more time before we wrap up and tell us again what you say to kind of your formula that you say to your son? Because again, I would like for my own needs to have my plan of, okay, I need to apologize to my daughter. I had just done something that she wasn't called for on her end, right? She's having big emotions for it. How do I reconnect and repair? Will you walk us through that one more time?
Yeah, sure. So I like to start it by kind of acknowledging what I did. Mommy's voice got really loud. Or do you remember this morning when I said this or when this happened? And then you can say as a parent what the feeling was. I was feeling frustrated. We don't need to add on the because, right? Like adding on the blame. Kids, they probably don't even remember. And if you think about when somebody's talking to you, you don't want to hear the because. That's all you ever hear. If somebody's like, I was angry because you da 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 da. So I'll say like, do you remember this morning when mommy's voice got really loud? I was feeling really frustrated. I'll try and make a guess about how that might feel for them just to build a little bit of connection. I wonder if that was kind of scary, or I know when I hear loud voices, that feels kind of scary for me. A lot of times your kid will nod if they're old enough. They'll like nod in acknowledgement, or they'll say, yeah, it was, right? It kind of gives that connection. It lets them feel heard, which is the best feeling in the world when you feel like somebody actually understands you and knows what's going on in your brain. And then you say what you're going to maybe do differently next time. I know that when I get angry, taking a deep breath helps me. I forgot to take a deep breath today. So I'm going to try and take a deep breath next time. I'm going to try and take a break next time. Or I'm going to pause and take a sip of my coffee, or I'm going to go get a snack so that maybe next time I don't let my voice get as loud. And you can say sorry, or you can kind of, whatever it is that feels good for you. And I tell parents, like, apologizing doesn't mean that you're giving permission for the behavior, right? Like, just because I don't want to give permission to myself to do that every single time. Just like when a kid does something, it's not that acknowledging a feeling doesn't mean we're giving permission for it to happen. But whatever you can do to rebuild the connection, basically say like, I'm sorry, this is what I'm going to do next time. Big hug, cuddles. It really is like, it's a really wonderful moment to have with your kids, and they appreciate it. And I always say it's what I want my son to be able to do. Right? I want him to be able on the playground to say like, I'm sorry that I said this. It probably made you feel sad when I said this. I'm going to do something different next time. Right? Like that is what we want.
It is. And wouldn't that be amazing if that's what everybody did, right? That we kind of acknowledged it. And how do we repair that? I may even write this down on my phone for notes to do this, because I know I'm going to need to do it. Maybe we've included it in the show notes so that it's just something that you can copy and paste and save, for future use should you need it. Because I think that reconnection repair process is so key. And I, as a parent, don't know that I've been taught how to do that in today's world, right? Like having new examples of how to do that in today's world. Thank you for that.
No, you're welcome.
So it's good to know. So we went through a bunch of stuff. That mom rage is real. It's very normal. As Ashley, as you mentioned, it comes a lot from unmet needs and looking at what your triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you really fix with that reconnection and repair process? And then look at using a plan so that you can really have your unmet needs met sooner. So you have less likely to have mom rage in general. And I feel like that could be a guidebook right there for moms of just something we should all know and be taught over and over again. Ashley, what did I miss? You have shared such amazing insight with us right there. I mean, I feel like this is gold, and thank you for this.
That was a great synopsis, Kelly. You're right. It would be a good guidebook. Maybe we'll do that too, on top of everything else.
Yeah. Just even knowing that this is okay. Because I remember we yelled at my 3-month-old. My husband looked at me like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It wasn't okay. But to know that it was coming from something and I wasn't a terrible mom.
Right. You're never a bad mom. And sometimes, I tell myself, whatever affirmations you have to say today, I'm not a bad mom. I'm a tired mom. I'm a hungry mom. I'm an overwhelmed mom, but I'm not a bad mom.
And I'm the perfect mom for my child.
Yes.
Yes. Ashley, thank you for giving all of us steps that we can follow, kind of even giving us a little playbook to how to work on that repair once this does happen, and just giving us a safe space to know that this is okay and we're not bad moms. Thank you on behalf of all of us listening. This was so very helpful.
Always a pleasure chatting with you, Kelly.
You as well. Well, we will see you next week. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to hit subscribe, leave us your feedback, and give us a 5-star review. For even more support, visit us at wethrivepostpartum.com/podcast to sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community. Remember, you are not alone. With support, you can feel better. Together, let's thrive postpartum.